Hello and welcome to a brand new Arseblog, Arsecast right here on arseblog.com. How are you? Hope you're well. Thank you very much indeed, as always, for being here. It's been a strange kind of quiet week, has it not, after the hectic nature of the last few months, all the midweek football, the post-Liverpool stuff, even if there was a lot of nonsense around that game. Most of the nonsense didn't involve Arsenal, by the way. It was mostly Liverpool fans doing weird things to their own player or making really, really weird banners. Lads, I've got a great idea for the game against Arsenal. Oh yeah? What's your really great idea? Because, I'm all on for celebrating winning the title. A few beers, sing a few songs, have a bit of crack, won the title. That's good, right? No, listen, we'll go and buy a length of fabric. Okay, intriguing. Go on. And then what we'll do is we'll ask one of our mums to embroider a picture of Mikel Arteta on the fabric. Oh, great idea. That's brilliant. And it'll be like Mikel Arteta wearing a hat like with a big L on it, right? For loser, or a t-shirt that says second or something like that. Yeah, that's great. No, it's even better than that. Better than that? Are you serious? How is this even possible? What genius idea do you have in your mind? All right, are you ready for this? Yeah? Okay, steady yourself. It's Mikel Arteta in a dress. And you can see like a little bit of cleavage and stuff. And he's holding some flowers. And is this going to look really, really like Mikel Arteta? Yeah, I mean, it'll sort of look mostly like him. You'll know it's him because we'll have the words Mikel Arteta on the banner. But it'll look like, you ever see those really bad waxworks? Yeah, it'll look just like one of those. Okay, great idea. Who's going to pay for all this, though? Because I'm saving for my holidays. Don't worry. I've got some very, very influential backers to make this project come to fruition.
Just get out, that's all. Get out, get out, that's all.
Anyway, after all that, it was a quiet enough week. There was an open training session at the Emirates Stadium. Kai Havertz was there. He could be back for this weekend's game against Newcastle. We'll have to wait and see on that. Declan Rice was training. Leandro Trossard was training. There's a new kit. The new kit was launched. Quite like it, I have to say. Quite like the new home kit, the new home shirt. It looks nice, simple, a bit more traditionally Arsenal, let's say, than some of late. It is a bit of a shame they didn't just stick with the cannon on the shirt. The badge is there, but I do like the simplicity of the cannon. That's good. Maybe we can go back there again at some point in the future. I did want to give a quick shout to, let me find this here on Blue Sky, Dom, who's at dominicfury.bsky.social. He sent me a message today, Thursday, saying, as it's new kit day, I thought you might be interested to know that since last May, Arsenal have released 32 clothing drops. Here's the list and the dates, and it's a full list of all the things that they've done, like golf and coats and hoodies and training wear and retro collections and all that kind of stuff. He says, I've also included the pottery drop because, what the fuck? Apparently there was some Arsenal pottery released. That one passed me by. I'm very disappointed. As a keen pottery collector of pottery and all things potting, it's a shame. I'm sure I've missed out on the exclusive limited edition pottery collection, but there you go. A lot going on from a merchandise perspective. And with that amount of merchandise, God damn it, they better buy a good striker this summer. That's all I'm saying. Everyone's done their bit. Those things have sold out. People will be wearing their Arsenal Adidas golf range on the courses this summer. Do I include myself in that? If I speak, I'm in big trouble. But I'm just saying that they have asked a lot of the fan base, put your hand in your pocket, buy your Arsenal merchandise. I think we've done our bit. So all we want in return is a great striker and a really good winger and probably another goalkeeper and another central defender and possibly a midfielder and another midfielder, a more creative midfielder. That's all we want. It's a quid pro quo situation. I buy your things, you buy me things. That's how it works, certainly. Ask Hannibal Lecter. just a quick word before we get on with the show. For any of you listening who are experiencing some issues with the Arseblog app on Android, you might have the old version. There is a brand new version out there right now, but by pushing that one live, it's kind of had an impact on the old one, so some of you will be experiencing crashes. Delete the old app and install the new one, which you can find in the Google Play Store. For some reason, it doesn't always show up when people search for Arseblog. I don't know why. I've had a few emails about that. So you will find a link to the new Android app in the show notes. There are some improvements, some little tweaks coming as well in the next week, and there's a new version, some updates coming for the iOS app as well. But if you are having problems with the Android app and it is crashing all the time, chances are you've got the old one. Just replace it with the new one and everything should be hunky-dory. Right. Time to get on with today's show, and it is my pleasure to welcome back to the Arsecast, as always, Amy Lawrence. Good morning, Amy.
Hey, Andrew. Long time.
It's been a while. I was hoping we will be talking in more felicitous circumstances, but, it is what it is. How have you found the last little while?
Phew, that's a good question. I think I've been kind of surprisingly phlegmatic, which for some reason that word always makes me think of David Seaman. You know, when David Seaman was signed and everybody said he's a phlegmatic goalkeeper.
Phlegmatic. Wow.
Which from memory kind of meant really, quite easygoing, and he wasn't one of those kind of you've got to be mad to be a keeper types. He would just like do his deep laugh and relax and get on with it and not show any kind of big reactions.
Sure.
Just accept things. I think when you're a goalie, you have to, one of the things they try and teach you, and it's the same with referees, is that if you make a mistake, you have to put it in a kind of a dustbin of your brain as quickly as possible.
Sure. And
like eliminate memory of it and sort of restart. I'm not saying that I'm putting the last few weeks into a kind of mental dustbin, because I think it's really important. And I think actually looking back on the season when it's really over, there's going to have been a lot of learnings. But I think maybe it's just part of, the aging process, that how I would have felt about this season 20 or 30 years ago, I think is probably different to how I feel about it now, with just a little bit more ability to take a step back and look at reasons and understand things, which I know is not really how people operate, particularly in the modern world with instant judgments and the need to have a strong reaction and have a take. And, I think one of the things that really bothered me about, I've gone going all over the place on this answer. I'm sorry, it's proper verbal diarrhea. One of the things that bothered me was I saw a bit too much of the word excuses bandied around about analysis of how the last few weeks have turned out. And I don't really buy that. I think there's a huge and really important difference between excuses and explanations.
In today's world,
his excuses. Arteta and his excuses. Arsenal fans always making excuses. It's like, actually, no, these are not excuses. These are just explanations.
I have this written down as something I was going to come to later because, well, it was just something that occurred to me, but we're here now, so we might as well talk about it. Because I had reasons, not excuses, written down.
Great.
Right? And I think it is difficult to parse that in some ways because, I've seen what you've seen in terms of that. Oh, the excuses, the injuries, this, the red cards, that. And I get it. Arteta says it himself. These are things we have to master. We have to, expand the margins. Whatever he said recently is about that. But I do think it's slightly intellectually dishonest to dismiss actual reasons as excuses. if you're analysing what went on, could Arsenal have done things better this season? Absolutely. Are there things they could have done in the transfer market that might have ameliorated some of the problems that we had? Absolutely. But does that make some of the challenges that we have faced excuses or just reasons why, we've sort of compounded the other stuff that we could have done by things that were done, I'm not going to say to us per se, but a lot of stuff happened to Arsenal this season that was in some ways out of our control. And again, people will be listening to this going, I don't want to hear this. It's your job to build a squad. You've got to be able to deal with injuries. You've got to be able to deal with this. You've got to be able to... I get it. But I do think if you are being fair in your analysis of what's happened, that yes, Arsenal could have done things better, but B, there was like a confluence of factors this season, which it was like a perfect storm that we didn't deal with, et cetera, but they were there. I don't think you can really look at the season and not think about those things in those terms, for me anyway.
It was a really long and annoying storm, and I think that's the thing that probably is most difficult about this season when you try and process it all, because it just felt like, when the weather's like that sort of thing, where you think, what the hell is it doing now? And in a day it can change 20 times, and like 1 minute you're cold and the next minute it's pissing down, and then the sun comes out, and then there's a breeze, and then it's another bit more rain, and that.
I live in Ireland. I know.
Well, I think that's kind of been a bit of a metaphor for the season, and I'm sure that Arteta will think, as soon as something, I felt like there was never really a period at any point where Arsenal got motoring, like got proper momentum. It just, as soon as you thought things were had gone up a gear, you had to hit the brakes.
We've been pushing a boulder uphill since August. That's the way I feel about this season.
And I think you're 100% right when you say we cannot ignore the facts that, they have to take the learnings from how did we build the squad, and did we do enough, and did we react enough, and did we control all the things that we can control enough. And I'm absolutely certain that the person who most wants to look at all that is Mikel and all of his staff and the owners and all that. They're not going to be thinking they're so great and they're so unlucky, and look at our excuses. They'll be trying to improve on every improvable aspect.
Sure.
But I think when you're looking at this stuff, there's a couple of things in whatever you do in life that are factors, that basically happen. One of which is just the human condition and human frailty, i.e. somebody loses form, somebody's unhappy, somebody gets injured, things happen to humans that affect us. For all you've spent 800 gazillion billion and, it's your fault because it should be brilliant and you should win. And how can you, 5 years and still in the Premier League club, it's like, it's just nonsense, because things happen to people that, you have to accept, because we've all got human frailties. And the other factor is luck. And, it doesn't matter how much money you spend. It doesn't matter how, prepared you are. It doesn't matter how many sports scientists and data analysts and all the high tech that you have at your disposal that you can use. You can be a bit lucky or unlucky. It happens. And it just felt a bit like the human element and the luck element were factors as well this season. And I just think, with the best will in the world, all the best teams out there, all the best players, all the best managers are vulnerable to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you were to ask, Liverpool fans, have you been lucky this season? I don't mean lucky in terms of what they've done on the pitch, because they're the worthy champions. Have you been a bit lucky in terms of player availability and injuries? And Mo Salah's been fit all season, whereas Bukayo Saka missed a third or more of the season. I think they'd have to say, yeah, we have been a little bit lucky. And that's sort of out of your control. Before we sort of expand on this a bit, I was trying to think about how to contextualize this a bit in terms of the reaction and how I felt about it and how you said you felt about it there. And I was trying to draw a parallel with another time where there was high expectation, but maybe under delivery. And I immediately thought of those 3 seasons between 99 and 2001, right? So we'd won the double. So like that gives you...
That's the difference from this.
That is obviously the difference. Yeah, there was a huge success and that gives you a lot of goodwill. You've got credit in the bank. But the next season, Arsenal finished runners-up to Manchester United by a point. United won the league with 79 points, by the way, that season. Next year, we finished 14 points behind. The following year, we finished second again, 10 points behind Manchester United. And I did try and think about how I felt back then with the players that we had, with the team that we had, with the level of expectation and that sort of second place thing.
Yeah, but in addition, Andrew, to all the second places, was losing the UEFA Cup final to Galatasaray, which was a shocker, losing the FA Cup final in 2001 in ridiculous circumstances when an outfield player was allowed to make a save.
Stefan Ansho's handball,
yes.
Yeah. And the 99 FA Cup semi-final. So there were all these...
So I think that feeling of being, runners-up, nearly men, second again, ole, ole, was even more enhanced because that was a team that was capable of fighting on all fronts. There was even a Champions League quarter-final, maybe.
Was it Valencia?
Yes, the Valencia one.
Yeah.
That sticks in my mind so strongly, even compared to European, moments where Arsenal went further or got closer. That Valencia, John Carew away, I'll never forget it. I'll never forget the feeling at the end of that game of, it was a really shocking kind of despair.
Yeah.
Because I think there was this, I can't remember the details, but there was something with Vieira where I think either there was a row or people said he was going to leave and he'd had enough. I can't remember exactly, but it was all a bit intense. And I remember Arsene coming into the press room. And this was, of course, first decade Arsene, when things were broadly pretty good. This was not second decade Arsene when, he was dealing with a lot of strain. And I remember thinking, shit, he looks ill. I think that everybody at the club thought that was going to be Arsenal's year in the Champions League. And when you looked around at the teams, I think Leeds maybe were...
Did they get to semi-final that year?
Yeah, I think there was the teams around them were not the best going for it. It was one to win, put it that way, with a great team, with great players. Anyway, I've gone off on one as usual, but
no.
Yeah, I completely agree with you about that correlation between. I think what the players are feeling, as the current players, as they're enduring this kind of seconditis, is really interesting, because I think when you're in that situation, everybody's going to feel their own stuff. There's no set way to feel. Some people will feel that it fuels their determination, and others will feel that kind of disillusionment. Yeah. And it can be all sorts of things in between, or all sorts of tangents. And I don't know why, but I think the thing that somehow excites me about next season is that I am imagining in that dressing room that there's quite a lot of angry frustration rather than feeling sorry for yourself frustration. And I think that they can turn that anger into fuel. I've got a feeling that Arsenal, with the right kind of recruitment to address the obvious issues, with hopefully players coming back to fitness and staying fit, that means that they won't be as exposed as they were in terms of the strength of the squad. I think they're ready to use it in a way that maybe in the last couple of seasons they weren't quite as ready to use that emotion for finishing second. I was worried when the body language of the players at the end of last season, having been so much closer to Man City and thinking, winning 16 out of 18 and thinking it's going to happen, that they felt so crushed. They looked so upset because I think they really believed that it was their turn. Whereas I think the first season against Man City, it was all a bit overwhelming and kind of new, and you're never quite sure that you deserve it when you haven't done it before. But that second time, I think they felt that they were ready and deserving and had done enough. And I wonder whether I was worried that they would maybe be just finding it hard to rouse themselves from that disappointment. I don't think that's going to be the same this coming summer. I think they're going to be super duper focused.
Yeah, I think so, and I hope so. And I was just sort of going back to that previous period that we mentioned, it's sort of hard to get a real handle on how we were feeling because, the social media wasn't there and the sort of history of the blog, what have you, wasn't there. So you don't know what you wrote about it at the time. But I can only imagine for those players in particular, and we're talking about, winners, serial winners from the back four, back five who were there at that time, to players like Bergkamp, Vieira, Henry, Pires, who achieved so much. That period of not winning things must have been a motivation. The pain of some of those exits and some of those, if you want to call them failures, but lack of success during that period must have been. And I really do hope that is something that we use as a football club, as the manager will do. I wanted to sort of bring it back around to Mikel Arteta, though, because after Liverpool, talked about Arsene coming into that dressing room after the Valencia game, the John Carew goal, which knocked us out on away goals against Valencia, and looking ill. I looked at Mikel Arteta after the Liverpool game and I saw a guy who was clearly emotional, clearly feeling the pain of a long season, and ultimately I'm not going to say he lashed out, but he didn't pull any punches. He didn't mince his words in the post-game press conference or on the Sky interview after the game. Do you understand him being that forthright, that upset, that hurt publicly? I've spoken to a lot of people about it this week. Most people are like, I'm absolutely fine with what he said there. We have the standards. If you fall below the standards, he's going to call you out. It just felt maybe a little out of character for him. Maybe it's deserving because of the way this season has gone, but I was just interested in your read on that reaction.
Well, he is usually, even though he's an emotional guy, quite controlled with it, I think, certainly in public announcements. I wonder what he thinks. I wonder if he thought, sometimes when you get a bit excited and afterwards you think, ooh, well, I do anyway. Oh, God, should I really have said that? I wonder if he was thinking that, or if he was like, I'm good with that. That needed doing. The one thing I would say is I think with any manager and any leader, you can't be the same all the time because people get bored of the messaging. And that's one of the things that, although with the Amazon doc, there was certain body of opinion that took the mickey out of some of his ideas. I think it's imperative to do that kind of thing. You cannot just be the same voice saying the same stuff in the same way and expect, occasionally different results. I like that about him. I think he's really creative and imaginative and aware that to get inside the heads of high performance elite athletes and to eke every positive drop out of them, you need to be changing your own records. You need to be giving them different sparks in their brains so that they're constantly challenged, thinking, able to be kind of emotionally mature about different situations. I think it wasn't a big deal for me. And if it's part of it seems to be part of his methodology, because it would have been very, very easy at half time for that game to have slipped away.
Yeah.
And I definitely wasn't expecting the vast improvement in kind of mental and physical energy in that second half, because I just, it stands to reason they're knackered. They've been through an awful lot, psychologically and physically. And it was almost miraculous for them to find those levels in that second 45 minutes. So it was clearly time for something different to elicit a different response. Maybe also there was a bit of a kind of, we could be overanalyzing, but we can assume that the way he tried to get the team going in some of those league games that have fallen away and drifted, the Palace, but I can't even remember. It seemed to blend into one.
Brentford.
Maybe that was Mikel's way of saying, what other things we've been trying to get you through those games hasn't worked, but we're not going to be the same here.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what you think. It's a very difficult question, so I apologize in advance. But we've talked about learning lessons from the season and talked about, what Arsenal didn't do as well as they could, that they could control. I mean, do you think that might be the big lesson for Mikel Arteta, that variation might be the key, not just in terms of, how he talks to the media or how he talks about his team and his players to the media, but in terms of what he is capable of doing with his team? Because I think there's this ongoing conversation. It's been a conversation, I think, for a while about maybe Mikel Arteta's circle of trust in relation to squad depth at Arsenal, where he often talks about variety, talks about needing a bigger squad, but ultimately in the seasons where we have been challenging or expected to challenge, the pool of players has been pretty small. Now, you could say in the first season maybe, and maybe even in the second season, that the squad depth wasn't there because he didn't necessarily have the amount of players that he could trust. I feel like it was slightly expanded last year, but the squad depth is not there, and the pool of players that he can use is not there because of injuries, because you've got no Tomiyasu, you've got no Ben White for a while, no Saka, no Havertz, no Jesus, all these guys who we know have been absent. So there has been that restriction there on the players that he can use. But going forward next season, and we'll talk maybe a bit about the summer now in a second, but after what we hope is a successful summer in the transfer market, how important is it for Mikel Arteta to be able to display an ability to use the full depth of his squad? Because, I think they've been running on fumes, I think, some of them. There's no question, because of the physical demands, and I think as well the mental demands that come with playing week after week after week after week. Someone like Jurrien Timber, for example, is the guy with the fourth most outfield minutes for Arsenal this season, which I'm pretty sure was not the plan for a guy coming back from an ACL injury, right? But the circumstances are what they are, and he's had to be used. Does that take Arteta out of his comfort zone a little bit, or is it necessary for him to get out of that comfort zone to sort of take another step forward? If, as he says, this season has been a step backwards in league terms, to take a step forward, is he going to have to do things a little bit differently and operate a little bit differently?
I'm going to go back to that word learnings. And I think it's really fascinating to try and imagine how much at his point of his career and his own development as a manager he is wanting to and is learning. Because it's a dilemma, because on one level you're the manager, you've got to be decisive, you've got to have a plan, you've got to know what you're doing, you've got to make the big decisions, you can't be wavering all the time, you've got to have an idea and sort of stick to it. But on the other hand, being open-minded enough to look at trends or look at new developments and see if there's things you can integrate into your own methodology is a mark of a great leader as well. So I'm thinking, yes, does he look at his use of squad and what have you and wonder about that? But again, he might have even learnt from seeing some of his players over the season, and there'll probably be some guys that maybe in pre-season he thought he could trust, and then as time went on he thought, well, maybe I can't for whatever reason. And then there's others that you don't realise that you can trust them, like Miles, who's just,
Sure.
I'm sure that he's learnt something from the experience of those two young players coming through and giving so much to the squad in so many different ways, in their attitude, in their freshness, in their fearlessness. That's a learning. But even kind of in terms of way of playing, when you use that word variety, is there a learning about how the team is set up? Is it just going to be, this is the way we play, and out goes Havertz stroke Marino, and in comes striker X, and out goes.
No.
Or is there are there things you've learnt from the people that you've observed, particularly in the latter stages of the Champions League? I mean, the final four teams I thought were all brilliant teams in different ways, with all so much to admire in different ways. Mm-hmm. And there's things you look at Paris Saint-Germain and you think, look at the way their midfield functions. It's very different from Arsenal's.
Yeah.
Is there something we take from that we think maybe we want a different style of something, or the way that we're managing that part of the field? Look at Inter, and, they have a squad with a lot of old free transfers, all sorts of types of players, but eking the absolute maximum out of that group of players and how it's put together. Is there something you can learn from that? Barcelona, obviously, have this electrifying, breathless way of playing. Is there something that you take from that? You feel like the game's going on in a blur around you, probably, if you're a defender trying to keep track with all that movement and all that skill. So I'd like to think that one of the things, it's not just Mikel, he's got a big staff, that they will all sit and analyse is what's going on in football. What can we do to, what are the ingredients that make Arsenal better for next season? Where are the big gains? Where are the marginal gains? I'm sure that statistic about the amount of points dropped from winning positions will loom very large in their thinking. And, what's the best way of knocking that one on the head, big style?
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree. I think there probably will be something different with the team next season. Sorry, I thought you were going to cough there.
Sorry, I know.
That's okay. Both in terms of the actual personnel, but the tactical side of things as well. I think there probably needs to be some sort of change there. Variety isn't just with who you can put on the pitch; it's how you put them on the pitch and what way you set them up. I was just thinking what you're saying there about Barcelona. And what can you learn from them? And I remember we were in for Rafinha, if you remember, at that time, and it was a lot of like, do we really want that guy? He's come from Leeds. And then all of a sudden, he's a guy, with the season of his life scoring 30-odd goals. But
also, flip it. And I think we don't need to feel too much inferiority complex here. I think there are things that those teams can all look at Arsenal and take as a learning as well. And if I was them, I'd be looking at Arsenal and saying, look at how they've responded to having no centre forward. Look at what they did with a player like Marino. Look at what they've done with a player like Miles Lewis-Skelly coming in. I think that Arsenal were not perfect this season. We all know that. But there are still a lot of things that I think they've done in terms of trying to make the best out of their situation, the resilience that they developed. That is also it's something that I think others. We're all looking at it within the Arsenal bubble, but sometimes it's quite useful to go outside and say how do others see us? And I'm not talking about social media. I'm talking about people in football. Go and ask people in football across Europe what they think of Arsenal. You'll be getting very different set of responses, I think, than you would if you just
listen to some of the pundits,
or listen to Sky Sports.
Listen to Sky Sports. No, I agree with you. I mean, looking ahead to the summer, there's obviously various factors and building blocks, and I want to ask you about striker and forward additions now in a second. But Andrea Berta has come in. He's obviously going to work very closely with Mikel Arteta. He will be, to all intents and purposes, a facilitator for the things that Mikel Arteta wants to do. How you view that as his role. I do think this summer in particular, as he's getting his feet under the table and getting used to England and English football and the English language, among other things, that role as the guy who can get things done for Mikel Arteta is an important role. But how big a message this summer, when it comes to recruitment and to bring in the players that we want, how closely aligned do you think issues of retention are with that? And I'm thinking in particular of two players. Bukayo Saka is one who, because of his long association with the club, and he's a Hale End Academy graduate, has that in his heart, if you like, for want of a better way of putting it. But I think William Saliba is the other one. And I think if you are sending a message to the rest of Europe, to the football world, about what you're building and what you want to build and what you're capable of building, then I think if you re-sign William Saliba, it goes a long way to sort of solidify the foundations, if you like. I was very interested to see Real Madrid going after Dean Huyson, which I think is probably a good thing from an Arsenal perspective. I don't think it ends their interest in William Saliba, because we know the way they operate. They'll do the groundwork. They're prepared to wait, etc., etc. But I think this summer in particular, it makes it a bit less complicated from an Arsenal perspective to not be trying to fend off Real Madrid in a very serious way, which maybe if they were determined to go after Saliba and not Huyson, that's a more difficult situation to deal with. So before we get to recruitment and what else, do you see those two things as really important ingredients for this summer, or are they maybe not as high priority? They both have 2 years left, so it's not urgent, but in terms of just sort of saying, look, we are keeping our best players and we're going to add to them, it could be an important message to send.
It'd be a wonderful message to send, but I think in terms of urgent, they have still got 2 years on their contract, so it is by definition less urgent than bringing in the right pieces of the jigsaw to really push this team to a new level. It's really helpful. Obviously Eddie's departure didn't come at a good time and was unexpected, and everyone thought, but the fact that Berta has had a few months of this season to get to know everybody, to start developing relationships. If he'd have been coming in now, I would have been much more concerned. Mm-hmm. But from the vibes that have been going around, it sounds like he's involved a lot. He's around the players, around the training, around the club a lot. I'm sure he's spending time getting to know the relevant agents and all those people that sort out all the nitty gritty.
Sure.
He's watching a lot of matches. I think he's making an impact in that way. And people are regarding him as someone who's bringing a little bit of winning mentality into the party. Different kind of character in that regard. Edu was more sociable, let's say, in a different way. Yeah, He liked to spend time with people, chat. Whereas I think there's a kind of slightly hardened business edge to Berta where he just wants to get things done to win. So I'm fascinated to see. This summer's obviously the first opportunity that anybody gets to make a proper judgment on business he gets done, bringing people in, and also, like you say, looking after the internal contract renewals and so on. In a dream scenario, he ticks all the boxes. I was thinking about the Saliba one and had this conversation with a few people, and I'll ask you the same thing. So would you rather cash in now and get 100 and something million or whatever, because I'd be damned if I'm letting him go for any less, or would you rather have 2 more years of William Saliba and maybe he goes off at the end on a free, but ultimately Arsenal would have had 5, 6, how many years of one of the best defenders in the world who cost them 30 million quid?
It's a great question. I want to be in the stand at the Emirates after we've won the title and Saliba's leaving for Real Madrid in a free, so I can just boo him for being a bastard. It is a great question. It's a great question. I think I would be obviously disappointed and upset, but I would be very thankful for a good period. I think before he signed the last contract or something, I was quite worried. You thought here's someone who could be gone by the time he's 21, 22, and that's that. And I think if you can get 5 or 6 years of William Saliba, and he's not born and brought up here. He's got and he's coveted by the biggest clubs in the world. I think I don't mind that. Even though obviously you'd rather he stay forever. Sure, yeah. And it's a question then of like, if you do get that money in this season, who do you play there? Who can you buy? Who can you add to the squad with? It's a difficult one. There's no right answer, really. I don't think I would be right now more inclined to take 2 more years of William Saliba than take money for William Saliba. That's just me.
The other thing I want to mention just quickly when you were bringing up this whole topic is going back to those 99 to 2001 years, is how many of those players left during that period of second hiatus who you would wanted to stay?
None of the big ones.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. Maybe it was a different era. I don't know. But yeah, you're right. You keep people together, and keeping people together gives you that kind of consistency and synergy. And
I think that's what they'll be pressing home this summer, that this team is so close and don't go now, and they're young enough that if they do want the Trent Alexander-Arnold experience of a new life in a different place in future, they've got plenty of time for that, but they don't need to do it now. They can stay with us, and they can experience the rewards that they deserve.
Hopefully. And then Jamie Carragher will be on Sky saying he's well within his rights to do whatever he wants and go to Real Madrid. The big question this summer is, what do we do with our forward line? How do we improve our forward line? We have Kai Havertz. He's back in training. That's good ahead of this weekend against Newcastle. He might be useful. Mikel Merino has shown himself to be an able deputy, even if I don't think under ideal circumstances you want to be playing him there at all next season.
I'm coming round to it, though. I think he's been just exemplary. Anyway, but yeah, I take your point.
Big man, double partnership with Havertz, and this is our variety. We're going Route 1 next season. But how pivotal is this decision this summer, whoever it is that they bring in, whether it's Sesko or Gyökeres or somebody else that we don't expect? I've seen links to João Pedro, whoever it is. How crucial is this decision for the next step, I guess you would say, of what's happening under Mikel Arteta? It's so difficult, isn't it? Because if you ask 100 people, who do you want? Like if you were to say, could you get Alexander Isak? I think that'd be consensus. But beyond Alexander Isak, who I think is an impossibility because it looks like Newcastle are going to finish in the Champions League spots, there is sort of discussion, debate, whatever you want to say about who's going to come in, and do you go with the slightly younger guy who's got a bit more room to develop, or do you go with the guy who's in his prime years, and is the prime striker the thing that Arsenal need at this moment in time? You can make good arguments on either side, the relative qualities of the league, all those things. It is a huge decision, isn't it, for Arteta, for the technical staff, the recruitment staff, Berta. They really have to put their heads together and make... I don't think they can get this one wrong, which is not to heap the pressure on, because I'm sure they're feeling that pressure anyway, but it does feel like the biggest transfer decision that this club has had to make for a long time.
It's like nerve-wracking even thinking about it. But I agree with you. It feels bigger than your average transfer, because so much else that the club have put in place is close. It's like, yeah, but we just need the thing. We just need the last thing, the really massive last thing, and you've got to be perfect.
Yeah, can't get this wrong.
It does feel nerve-wracking, and I feel just like we have to be brave enough as a fan base to put our trust in the experts at the club to choose the right guy and get it done. It is a struggle to choose between the various options, because they're not all identikit. Mm-hmm. And different people have different favourites for different reasons. And, Gyökeres, well, he only plays in Portugal. And, Sesko, he hasn't scored that many goals yet, but, he might be the next big thing in world football as a striker. And the thing that I feel about the people who have become like beloved, best in class at Arsenal is that the Arsenal have tended not to buy the ready-made top guy. Obviously Declan Rice was a bit of a new departure, I think, in that way.
Yes.
But if you look at the history of the club and you go back, even to the kind of Henri Vieira, these were not unknown average players that rocked up. They were, already good, but they came to Arsenal and they became something. There is a difference when a player comes to the club and they become something they've never been before. They elevate themselves to new levels at the club. It generates a kind of bond, a kind of love, which is why Thierry still talks about Arsenal as he's a fan, which is why Patrick, if you get the chance to talk to him, he still has the depth of affection for Arsenal, which is unlike anything else. Which is why Wrighty's like he is. Again, Wrighty wasn't a nobody, but he became, Yeah,
he exploded at Arsenal.
A mega version of himself.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
When he was there. And probably the only one who's a bit different is Dennis Bergkamp.
But even then, he's coming off the back of adversity.
But he was still, he was in a rough spell when he came to Arsenal, and he needed that love to, to again become one of the greats in the world. And I'm just looking at this hole at the top end of the team, and whoever it might be, I want that to be someone who fits that idea where whatever they were before, this is going to be their magic place. That everything is going to click in that way, that they become better than they ever have been before, and they, their status changes because of what they do at Arsenal Football Club.
If it's Gyökeres, if he comes to Arsenal and does what he hasn't done before, he's scoring 100 goals a season. And I know it's Portugal.
Well, I suppose maybe what I'm saying is that's one of the things that makes me feel slightly about him, because I think how much more growth is there in Gyökeres?
But do you need growth, or do you need a guy who's just going to stick it in the back of the net? You know what I mean?
If he can if he can continue to do what he's doing in the Premier League and in the Champions League, in decisive matches, and help Arsenal to win stuff, great. But if you need I just wonder whether there's, with another player who's still got some growth in them, that possibility that they can become one of the best players in the world in their position. So if Šeško, for example, they see something in him that they think, given a little bit more development and settling in, and the quality of players around him, the quality of opposition, the quality of competition, he could be one of the top three strikers over. He could be Isaac class or Haaland class or whatever. If you think that you can get someone that can be that class, you've got to get them while they're young. You can't get them when they're there. You've got to get them before.
Well, Isaac is the perfect example of that, isn't it? The opportunity was there, we didn't do it, and now he's basically unattainable. I mean, is there maybe a case to be made that if, for example, you decide to go with Gyökeres as the striker option, that player that you're referencing, that guy who could become something else, is also attainable in a slightly different position, right? So someone like Nico Williams, who Arsenal we know have a lot of interest in, who has done well at Athletic Bilbao, but when you look at the numbers, they're not amazing. But is there a possibility that you offset, let's say, the sort of here and nowness, for want of a better phrase, with Gyökeres, with another signing who might then become that guy who could augment the sort of meat and drink, the bread and butter of the guy who just scores a lot of goals?
Okay, let's make a deal. Working on the assumption there's two attackers coming in.
Yeah.
One of them can be that guy. I don't care which one. And the other one can just be really, really good. How's that?
Okay. I'm down with that. Final question before I let you go. I mean, this season it's felt like scoring goals. If we want to boil it down, if we don't want to talk about reasons or explanations or excuses, if we want to just bring it down to brass tacks, is it about scoring goals? Is it the lack of firepower that has been the sort of the through line of Arsenal's season? Because defensively, this team is very good. We know that. The best record in the Premier League. Maybe it's gone a little bit after the last week or so. I don't quite know. But basically, we're a very, very good defensive team for the most part. But with an extra 15 goals in the Premier League, we could be looking at a different Premier League table. So does it come down to that? And if that is the case, is there maybe something to be said that the balance of how we play, I'm sure Mikel Arteta will be like, I want the best defensive record and the best goal scoring record. That's exactly what he wants. Are those two things simpatico? Can you do that effectively? It has been done. There's no two ways about it. It has been done by other teams in the past where they've combined a really good defensive record with a really good attacking record. But do you see maybe as if we're going to focus a bit more, try and score a few more goals, does that come at the expense of a bit of defensive solidity? And would that necessarily be a bad thing?
I think it depends if all these new extra goals are basically coming from the forwards or if you're asking your midfield to be very different. Because if you're asking your midfield to be very different as part of the search for more goals, then that might well affect the defence.
Would you like the midfield? Would you like the midfield to be a bit different?
That's such a good question. I admit to being quite taken by what I saw from Paris Saint-Germain's midfield and feeling a difference stylistically. I think Arsenal have some outstanding midfield players, Declan Rice in particular, but the kind of synergy that those guys had, those three together, is that's really impressive stuff. It was a bit of a level apart, I think. I'm going back to the kind of is goals the difference? Yes, but I'd have a kind of brackets. Yes, Arsenal want more goals, but I think more creativity and more maverick and more unexpectedness and variety. And I think one thing this team lacks is a player who just gets hold of the ball and does something amazing, like a kind of a bit of an individualist, so a guy who could score an amazing solo goal. We don't do that often enough. I'd like another option for that, ideally as well.
Do you think
in the makeup of the squad, so it's not all just a kind of build up, bum bum bum, until you get a finish or a shot away?
Is that an area where, if we're talking about Mikel Arteta taking lessons and learnings from this season, that even if it's not necessarily the thing that he would go for first and foremost, it might be something that he has to add to the squad?
I'd love it to be part of the conversation, and there's obviously limits. You can't do everything you want all at once. So maybe some of it gets delayed, but I'd like to think that Kvaratskhelia just blows me away. Mm-hmm. And a player who's got that kind of mesmeric ability to kind of almost just stop you in your tracks and then pull out something unbelievable. I just think if you can put that into a great team, it's a huge asset.
Yeah, I agree. It's something I would love to see from Arsenal. A bit more...
Like even Alexis Sanchez-y. I was having a conversation with my son earlier about, all the attacking options. And I know there's a few rumours going around. I have no idea if there's anything to them about Rodrigo. Mm-hmm. And he was trying to make the connection that Rodrigo has got a bit of Alexis Sanchez vibes going on. South American, a big Spanish team, but not considered to be, one of the top guys in that Spanish team. So maybe go somewhere else to be able to really fully express themselves and take off. I haven't seen enough to know how accurate that is, but I kind of like the idea of it.
Yeah, no, I think generally speaking, I feel it's something like this team needs and maybe has needed for a little while. And if we think about, when the manager assesses the season, what was missing? Was it just goals, or was it also the sort of, as you say, maverick, the individualism, the mayhem that you can create in the opposition half or the final third that brings you goals? You can't. Every goal doesn't have to come from a nice pattern of play and triangles and what have you. So we will see. It's a big summer ahead anyway. And we hope we can sit here.
You're going to have nothing to write, mate. Just take the summer off.
I wish I could. I wish I could, but I think there's going to be plenty going on in the transfer market, in, out, and hopefully some contract extensions too. Right. I better leave it there and let you go. As ever, it's a pleasure. Amy, thank you very much indeed.
Cheers, Andrew. Have a good summer, everyone.
Thank you very much indeed to Amy. You can find her on Blue Sky. She is at amylawrence.bsky.social, at amylawrence.bsky.social, and of course, writing about Arsenal in The Athletic.
Yes, guys, I'm Rio Ferdinand, Premier League winner, TNT Sports pundit, and now podcaster on Rio Ferdinand Presents, which you can listen to on any platform. This message is brought to you by TNT Sports because the Premier League run-in is here. Every point matters at this stage of the season. The drama, the iconic moments that will live on forever. It sends our emotions into overdrive. Only sport can do this. Feel the highs and lows of the Premier League running live on TNT Sports. Stream TNT Sports on Discovery Plus or watch TNT Sports channels on EE, Sky and Virgin Media. Subscription required. Age 18 plus. T's and C's apply.
So that is just about that for this particular episode. This weekend, we are going to be, along with our friends from Arsenal Vision, at Union Chapel, our now traditional end-of-season live podcast. We're looking forward to seeing many of you there. If you are a Patreon member and you haven't been able to get tickets, there are some still available. If you check on the Discord, if you check on Patreon as well, there is a pinned post there where people who can't now go to the show do have tickets for sale. So if you fancy it, if you fancy coming along on Saturday for an evening of Arsenal chat, discussion, audience Q&A, some fun stuff as well. Plus, afterwards, we'll be upstairs in the bar at Union Chapel, sharing a beer, mingling, saying hi, and all that kind of stuff. That's how you can find some tickets to come along, and we are looking forward A, to doing the show. It's always great fun, and B, seeing lots of you there on Saturday evening ahead of the Newcastle game on Sunday, which I will be at, and fervently hoping for a big Arsenal win, because I'd like to stuff it right up those Magpies after some of the games that we've had against them this season. I feel like we owe them one. For more on that game, for a bit more of a preview and a bit more chat about the Newcastle game, you can join us over on Patreon, patreon.com/Arseblog, for a preview podcast. I think we will have that for you on Friday afternoon. Still to work out the timings because I'm traveling to London on Friday, but hopefully we squeeze it in Friday afternoon. We'll have that for you ready to go late Friday afternoon. Patreon.com/Arseblog. Okay, I'm going to leave it there for now, folks. Take it easy, and we will catch you on the next one. Until then, cheers. Bye-bye. When the time comes, do you want to do it like everybody else? Or do you want to show where your heart really is? Life is about making decisions such as classic mahogany, timeless oak, or elegant and affordable pine. Check out the full range of Arsenal branded coffins right now. You don't want to go in the ground without looking around.